Well, welcome back to another episode here on the Enneagram at Work podcast. Today, we are getting into, I think it'll be a fun topic, but I also think it is an important topic. And to help us, have this conversation, I am joined by one of our Enneagram MBA visiting faculty members, Dina Smith, who also has her own therapy practice, coaching practice. She is, in fact, a licensed mental health therapist. She is a clinical director and she is certified in the Enneagram. So, welcome to the show, Dina.
Thank you so much, Sarah. I'm so glad to be here.
So, we're going to talk about how to decide as a Enneagram kind of facilitator, but more importantly, as somebody who is interested in bringing the Enneagram into your team to understand the difference between Enneagram therapy, or I guess Enneagram coaching and then therapy, where you use the Enneagram, which this is a big trend that I'm seeing more and more therapists being certified in the Enneagram. And it is such a wonderful tool, but there's definitely some differences. And so Dina, with her expertise and experience, is going to help us have this conversation. Before we dive in, though, can you kind of give us the quick and dirty bio? Like what are you the director, the clinical director of? Any fun facts? Just tell us a little bit about your own Enneagram experience and professional experience.
Sure, yeah, I would love to. I'm a licensed mental health therapist. I've been in the field of behavioral health for 20 years, probably a little over 20 years. I introduced coaching as a part of my just skill set a few years ago. And I found the Enneagram just through my local community. It got brought up to me and became trained and started the certification process and really loved it as something that worked really well with my full-time regular gig. I am the clinical director of a treatment center, and so the Enneagram seemed to be something that worked really well with the clientele that we have. And I do have a private practice on the side where I'm using the Enneagram to inform my therapy services and also doing some coaching with it.
Okay, so we are, we're bringing a credible source to you today to have this conversation. So before we get into it, I think this will be interesting for our listeners, just to hear how you, as a manager, use the Enneagram, and then we'll maybe talk about if and when you use it with clients in that setting, because this tends to be one of the biggest questions. Like, we'll have a really fun workshop, whether it's 2 hours or 2 days. And then it's like, okay, well, what now what? Like, what do I do with it now? So just any thoughts, any specific examples of how you specifically as a leader in your organization use the Enneagram on a regular basis?
Yes. So it's been really helpful to have our actual team trained in the Enneagram, and so that a lot of us are using the same language when we provide supervision. It's helped me really have the framework to provide feedback to anybody, in terms of, not necessarily just their Enneagram type, but it does help me kind of look at like where their strengths are, how they could be utilized on the team, and then any ways that I can help offer support. I've definitely used it in like critical conversations. It's a great framework to have, and it's honestly been really helpful for me in terms of growing as a leader because I've had feedback from people that have been my direct reports about things that are related to my own Enneagram type and blind spots that I do have as a leader or a manager that, infiltrate kind of the relationship when you have a supervisee. And so it's been really interesting to have that just as kind of a foundation.
Okay, I'm putting you on the spot.
Okay.
Would you be willing to share, I guess a blind spot since you brought it up, but
Yes.
also a strength, and share what type you most identify with?
Yes. So I most identify as type 3. And so the blind spot for the type 3 is definitely if I'm supervising somebody who is maybe more feelings focused than I am, and we
Mm.
are having a critical conversation. Um, I am someone who doesn't always, even as a clinician, even as a therapist, just I don't always lead with feelings and considering, I'm more like, I need to get this done. I need you to get this done. We need to get this done. And so for someone whose lens is more emotionally centered or more emotionally dominant, that doesn't always land well. So that's kind of a blind spot that I've seen. I think a strength, though, being a type 3 is that kind of thing, like getting that kind of feedback, I really take it and run with it. And it will be something that I carry with me so that I don't, have any kind of hiccup in a relationship because for threes, it's really important that my relationships look successful.
Yes. Oh, so well said. I think other threes listening are going to relate. They're going to be like, oh, yeah, okay, it's me. Yep, yep. We did a fun episode. It's been several months now where it was just like the most stereotypical pairing of exactly what you were talking about.
Yeah.
The three, let's get it done, and then the four, like, wait a minute, you're not going to ask me how I'm doing or like really understand, not no
Yes.
follow-up questions.
Yes.
Um, and so that is that, yeah, that's a typical clash. But it's like, okay, I know about it and it will probably forever be a work in progress, like all of our blind spots can be. But the first step is just like, hey, what, yeah, accepting it, I guess.
Yeah. Yes,
And then working
exactly.
on it.
Exactly. Yeah. I think that's like a big important, especially any leader, any manager, supervisor, whatever. It's like that you have to have that acceptance no matter what type you are, that there's going to be areas that you've got to look at.
Okay, so let's get into the topic today where we're talking about the difference of, I guess, kind of coaching versus therapy, but more specifically, how do you how do you use Enneagram with the two different, I guess, methods, modalities? So, I guess that would be my first question is how do you use the Enneagram differently compared to coaching versus therapy? And if you want to give us a quick definition of each one just
Sure.
to set the stage, that
Sure.
might be great too.
So, okay, so if we're looking at kind of the difference between those two, the way that I kind of like to think about this, and because I think there's a lot of ideas out there, and it kind of is like, therapists can be coaches, but can coaches be therapists, and that kind of thing. My mindset is more about like the presenting kind of problem or presenting goal that the client might have. So somebody
Okay.
who like when I'm doing therapy with someone, even though the therapy that I do is informed by the Enneagram and we talk about what their type is and how the situations, regarding their type and their strengths and their blind spots. The therapy part of services is really more for someone who has symptoms that could meet some criteria for a diagnosis. Um, a lot of therapeutic processes are going to be looking more at like symptoms, frequency of symptoms, severity of symptoms, and criteria that could be for, a depression diagnosis and anxiety diagnosis. Something like that is really more where therapy kind of is, and people don't like that. Nobody likes a label, but when we do therapy, that's how we measure certain things, is how those symptoms are going in that. I think the other kind of differentiation between therapy and coaching is kind of the orientation. So therapy is often like we'll go back in the past and process things, where someone who is a coach is really looking at a client and where they are right now and a goal that they want to achieve right now in the same space of they're functioning okay day to day. So there's not symptoms and things happening that are impeding on their regular day-to-day functioning. And then the coaching is more is more like present. We'll talk about what's going on right now. I'm not going to process your childhood trauma with you in your coaching session. It's
Okay.
just that's just not really like a great fit. So I mean, like the Enneagram informed therapy that I would use. The other thing that has become that I've kind of developed into that I really didn't actually even think about initially was the Enneagram is hard to use in therapy if that's the only thing, right? It's like it's a great support to other frameworks. So it's a great support to using cognitive behavioral therapy. It's a great support to IFS. And those are kind of the theoretical approaches that I will couple the Enneagram with in therapy. We're coaching, it's like we're looking a lot at, deep diving your type and really looking a lot at your strengths in terms of this specific goal that you want to meet. Could be a relational goal, could be, something with work. I work with parents on their relationships. So it's more of a like now kind of like my life's not on fire right now.
Hmm.
So I have this thing that I want to do. I want to grow in this area. So, coaching is kind of more suited for that, if that all makes sense.
Okay. That does. I really like that. I really like the time orientation kind of like what do you need to go back and like process versus looking ahead to the future, which it
Yes.
sounds like is more coaching. So what might be like an example of or either a goal or a challenge that will bring people to coaching
Mhm.
versus therapy?
So I would say people that maybe like an example would be they are working and they maybe are somewhat higher achieving. They have these relationships at work and like something is not clicking and maybe it's preventing them from getting ahead at work or preventing them from being successful in a project or preventing them from just having good relationships at work. Then it's like that would be more of a coaching thing that you can dig into their Enneagram type, some of the things that we were just talking about, and look at like, okay, moving forward, kind of where do we need to go to make sure that when you're in a meeting with this person, let's think of specific strategies, for your meeting next week that you can implement that is you maybe accessing one of your paths or whatever it is, right? Looking at traits of your wings. And so that might be an example of someone who would come for coaching. And I think
Okay.
it's okay. Like, I do think it's okay. It's a fine line. And I think this is where it's really important as someone who practices as a therapist or a coach to know like your limitations. People in coaching sessions are going to bring up things from the past. I mean, that
Sure.
is going to happen. And it's kind of like our job as coaches is to not really open up a can of worms that a coach maybe doesn't know how to put the top back on, if that makes any sense.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Okay. And then are there I'm assuming that there are, but are there just kind of some ethical or I guess responsible practicing things that a coach would need to keep in mind, a therapist would need to keep in mind just to make sure, or even, in my
Yeah.
case, as a facilitator, like
Mhm.
what is something or are things that we need to keep in mind?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I would say I would say all across the board, it feels like to me, and maybe this is just kind of, I don't know, or maybe it's because I was a trained therapist before I was a coach or doing any kind of facilitation like that. But it does feel like to me that confidentiality is like a universal thing when you're developing a relationship with someone as a therapist or a coach. I think that it goes for both roles. That confidentiality is something that should be just really at the forefront. I think the other thing is, and I really appreciated this with any coaching training that I have taken, even through my certification process, there's always been caveats about like if someone brings up, right, they're talking about hurting themselves, or they're
Mm.
starting to really talk about not being able to function every day. You know, they're exhibiting things that seem like not even like they're impaired, but they just like they're not progressing. And so I think if that happens in a coaching session, coaches need to know to refer someone to a therapist because that might be something more diagnostic or something that needs deeper assessment. I think that's the other thing is that coaches' assessments look a lot different than someone who's doing therapy. You know, I have different intake forms if I'm seeing someone as a coaching client versus a therapy client. I need to know more if they're a therapy client.
Mm-hmm.
I need to know more about their backgrounds than if someone's coming to me and is like, hey, my goal is to just, I want to improve like, my communication with this person and this is the struggle we're having. Like that's
Okay.
different. I don't know if that
Okay.
answers your question.
So
So
let
true.
me ask you this. So, I have seen a lot of therapists, and there are multiple like Enneagram informed therapy
Mhm.
certifications or education programs that I have been seeing over the years more and more. And then obviously Enneagram coaching. What do you see, like in your opinion, what is the benefit as a coach who might have additional modalities or a therapist who you definitely have other methods? What is the benefit of using the Enneagram?
I honestly, since I've been using the Enneagram, I cannot recall how I did therapy before. It's just
Oh,
like crazy. I'm like, this is making everything so much easier
yes,
for us,
yes.
like for both myself and the client. Such a benefit because it's like you have the same language, right? We can like I can teach that language and then that's what we're using. And I think the Enneagram just, it's one of the things I love about the Enneagram compared to some other personality assessments that are out there. I feel like there's so many out there right now.
So many.
So many. And I think a lot of them are good, including the Enneagram, obviously. But I really like that the Enneagram, it doesn't just look at like, hey, you're doing this behavior, or this is like your automatic kind of habit that you do in relationships, like, good luck to you. It's like, this is something that automatic for you, and this is what's motivating that. And we're not going to change that part, maybe, but there are all these other parts of you that you have that you're not really leaning into that are part of your whole personality. And so I love it, like, doesn't put us all in a box. I love that. I love that it's like a more, always feedback I get is it's more strengths based, which
Hmm.
I think is, what people are looking for when they're seeking a therapist or a coach or help with their team. But yeah, I think it helps really frame kind of, it feels like to me, I can connect faster. And I
Hmm.
think the client feels like I'm understanding them more sooner.
Okay.
And I
I
don't I don't think like I would never tell somebody, this is the other thing about the Enneagram is like if we're in sessions together as a coach and we do a typing interview or something and then you're like, hey, I think this is my type and I disagree. I'm not going to argue with this person like that's
Yeah.
not your type. But
Yeah.
and it may not even come up, we as a therapist or in a coaching session, I would never like, hey, this is that like type 3 thing that you do, but it's just like, yeah, I really feel the rapport gets built faster. And it's such a comforting, I don't know, it just feels like a comforting thing because it's like, oh, you're already a little bit like in my heart and in my head, and you
Hmm.
already kind of know this stuff. So I think it's disarming for a lot of people.
Yes, yes, and I like what you've said it a couple times, and I also get this feedback from clients about the same language or shared
Mhm.
language. It's
Mhm.
like, when you say a dog. It's like you know kind of what a dog is,
Mhm.
but you don't know if it's like a poodle, a German shepherd, a pug.
Yes.
And so, like, that's where the curiosity can get into. But
Yes.
without the word like dog, you're like, it's a mammal, four
Mhm.
leg. And you're like,
Right.
it could
Could
be a
be other
tiger.
things.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And
Exactly.
so, you would get there eventually. But I think just
Totally.
knowing, like, okay, Dina most identifies as a three. Okay. I don't know everything about her, but it's like, okay, she's this category of a mammal or, whatever.
Yes. Yes. And I think that also like even in terms of so when I have therapy clients, I will use I will say for my coaching clients versus my therapy clients, the actual language, the Enneagram language comes up a lot less in my therapy sessions. Even though
Okay.
it's informed by the Enneagram, we're talking a lot less about the actual Enneagram type versus all the traits of that type and those
Okay.
kinds of things, right? So if I'm working with someone who is a type, let's say they are a type two. It's like when we're talking about, childhood wounds or family of origin issues in therapy and processing some of that, the language I'm using is not like, well, a lot of type twos, blah, 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 blah. I'm talking about like, wow, like you were in a situation where it really revealed that one of your strengths is helping or one of your strengths is
Hmm.
nurturing. And that's a situation in your life that brought that out. So that's how I would talk about it versus usually with coaching clients, it's more like out there because they're dealing with a goal that they want to achieve. They're looking at things that are less kind of lower severity, lower kind of heat in terms of friction and stress and that kind of thing.
Okay. Okay. That's helpful. So let me ask you this. So we're kind of pulling from your professional experience as a coach, as a therapist, but I
Hmm.
also know like also professional, but I think less like somebody's hired you. We talked about how you use it with your team. And
Yes.
I'm assuming when that happens, there's occasionally team dynamics. It's not just one on one necessarily, or maybe
Right.
you're bringing in a couple people or you're working through specific issues. And the
Right.
reason why I'm bringing this up is because I have gone through couples therapy before, and I
Mhm.
think almost after every workshop, people are like, oh, I could use this with my spouse, or I could use this with
Oh
my
yeah.
sister in law, or whoever. It's just like you have somebody that
Yeah.
you can use it with. So it is like about self awareness, but also others. And I think a lot of times managers are going to be in a position like you where they're like, okay, I'm maybe not a certified coach, but what I'm doing is like I'm kind of leading, or I'm leading, I'm kind of coaching.
Hmm.
um how do you use, like with your team, the Enneagram to navigate, I guess, others' awareness and that relationship management piece in addition to just the other or the self-awareness?
So it sounds like you're kind of asking, like, as a leader, how do you kind of use the Enneagram to help to like have awareness in those relationships with my team?
Yes.
So, I mean, I think, let me think about this. I think it's honestly for me, it's more, and maybe this is because I'm a type three, but it's more for me about like what not to do or
Mm-hmm.
like how
Mm-hmm.
not to approach a situation. And
Okay.
I think as a manager, it definitely gives kind of the background or the behind the scenes of why that person might have been motivated to do XYZ, right? Or to behave in XYZ way. So I think that kind of like behind the scenes clarity is really nice to have. But I think it is important if I didn't know, um, if I just knew the Enneagram, right? Or I took a class on it, or even if I'm like I am now, right? But nobody else on my team learned about the Enneagram, or I didn't bring anybody in to train with them or whatever, it wouldn't really be helpful because me knowing it isn't as great as we all know it. And so it's like I know the types of most of the people on my team. Like that's been something that's been established, right? And when you have new hires, you have to establish that because this is kind of how our team connects. And it's a regular part of, when we do we do try to do an annual retreat. I always try to bring something related to the Enneagram because I want to make sure that they still know like this is kind of a thing for us. This is something we can all relate to. And some of it's for fun, of course, and it's
Mhm.
just funny, to talk about, oh, so and so, whatever, didn't join us for lunch, and it's, we know what his type is, and let's just like let him be. But I think it's so important that I, as the manager, know their types and they know my type because that to me has a lot of value in it. I think managers, it depends on the culture of the company, but I think, I work for a hospital system that's partnered with an academic institution and I've been there a while. So for me, I'm like, I try not to be one of those managers that is too unapproachable or too like I'm over here and y'all are over here, doing everything. So I want them to know my type because when I mess up in our relationship, maybe they can have some grace for that and it can lend to them, oh, it's actually not about me. Dina was doing her whatever thing she does, and that's why this ended up like that.
Yes, that is so helpful. I actually just had a situation with somebody in my immediate family, and I'm pretty sure she's a type 1, and we got into it, and I just felt like she was being kind of a nag and like overly critical and overly
Yeah.
worried. And I reflected on that situation, and then I was like, oh, I think it because she was so focused on this and I'm over here like I don't need that doesn't even get on my radar.
Right.
And so like that was helpful and like to repair that situation. And so whether it is the Enneagram, I mean, I'm obviously biased, but just having something that's like, oh, maybe this is what that person where that person was coming from versus like
Yes.
what I'm gonna assume that they were coming
Right.
from versus my perspective on life. So that can be really helpful.
For
Um,
sure.
let me ask you this. Sometimes people will say like, "Oh, the Enneagram is like astrology." Like, I mean, you could just like put any description over anybody, and that you could find ways to like tie it
Yeah.
to that. And so, I think. And maybe I'm kind of like maybe actually making another question, but I think the fact that you are in like a clinical setting, what what would be your response to somebody who might be having that misconception that the Enneagram is like astrology and you can't really rely on it in a professional setting?
Yeah, that's so interesting. I oftentimes have had have had people ask me about like, does it line up with astrology? Like if I'm a
Yeah.
Taurus, am I one of these types? And I'm literally like, I have no idea because I don't know astrology. And I've learned of other systems too that I'm like, oh my gosh, there's so many of these things out here. Um, and I guess what I would want to clear up, and I think I also have experienced, even, speaking at conferences and even in workshops, like I've experienced what's the history of the Enneagram
Mm-hmm.
and, is it evidence-based and that kind of thing. And I've received, years and years ago, when the Enneagram was first introduced to me, I had a little bit of the same kind of thing where like I was like, this is kind of weird. Like I'm
Hmm.
gonna put this down for now. Like I'm
Yeah.
exposed to it. Yeah, it's kind of accurate. But it's kind of like, I don't know if I can like dive into this yet, and then it popped back up in my life. So, but I would say, gosh, I would if something is a helpful tool, like if it's going to help you in your life, right? If it's going to help you in your relationships, if it's going to help you understand and heal parts of you that maybe are unhealed, if it is going to help you, move towards your goals, I would just say like difference does it make? You know what I mean? Like how much do you need to know other than this has been helping people. It has been something that has been, I think, really getting a lot more exposure.
Hmm.
And yeah, no, it's not astrology and it's not some of these other, things that I feel like will put you in a box or give you this label and then it's like you can't step out of this box. And I think that there's those misconceptions about it if you don't really understand all the layers of the Enneagram and all the different ways that it can be applied. Did that answer
Yeah.
your question?
Yeah, and I think that goes back to one of the very first things that we were talking about was using it responsibly. And
Yes.
I think an example of using it irresponsibly and why it can get a bad reputation or like pseudoscience kind of thing is
Mm-hmm.
when you do say, "Oh, Dina's a 3. I can predict her future behavior."
Mm-hmm.
Seven, Sarah's a 7. I know everything about Sarah now. And it's like, no, 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 no. We're both dogs,
Right.
and then sticking with this analogy. But it's like I don't know who. So I might be a pug. Dina might be a poodle.
Mm-hmm.
And you gotta
Yes.
ask clarifying question. It's a starting point. Anything you would add to
Yes.
that?
Yes, it's definitely a starting point. I think that there is so much, I think that if you only look at that, right? And that's why I think that it's helpful to have kind of other things when, especially when you're using it as in therapy, because I think therapy has like there's a sacredness to it. Mm, yeah, I agree with what you're saying. There's not if it were that easy, my goodness, we would all just get along like that. And that would just be our stereotypical way of doing things, and that would be it. And it's like it's just a much more dynamic situation than I think what a lot of people give it credit for. And there is so much, gosh, there's so much information on the internet. There's just so much out there. I try to share with people, be real cautious
Yeah, be real
about
cautious.
the
Yeah.
Enneagram, just like anything else, be real cautious about it. Because there are, I mean, just like I'm sure astrologers and all of that, there's so many different kind of approaches to different things. And it's like you want to be real cautious about that stuff. But yeah, no, I don't want to be just labeled as a dog.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
Somebody to
There's
get
so
to
much
know the other
more.
parts of me.
There's
There's so many other parts. And it's also like on your, like as a manager, you don't want, I think this is the other thing that is important when you learn about the Enneagram is, when you have a good facilitator, a good coach, or, someone who's able to use it in therapy, it's not it's not an excuse for how you are. So it's not like, well, but we talked about like I'm, free. So this is just kind of now what's going to happen. This is
Yeah.
how I am, it's not a stop. It's not a stop sign for you to just excuse your behaviors that are impacting people on your team or impacting, people in other departments or whatever it is. And you have to really dive a little deeper to understand that for that to make sense.
Yeah, yeah, totally. Yep. Um, I- okay, so I think I have two more questions before we
Okay.
wrap it up. Um, what advice would you have for listeners who want to make sure that they are working with a qualified, um, I guess, responsible therapist or Enneagram coach? What should we look for? Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, so I would say a therapist, so a qualified therapist using the Enneagram, you want to ask about trainings that they've had. You want to ask about how they use it with other modalities, with other theoretical approaches. Um, I think you also want to ask, I think it's always a good question to ask when you're seeking therapy, like just the person, are they actually licensed? Are they under supervision of a license? That kind of thing. And then I think for coaches, I really think for the Enneagram, like a certified coach is a great idea. I do think, people might disagree with that because sometimes some of these certifications take a long time or they're very expensive. And I would just say to people aspiring to do this, to add a coaching component to a therapy practice or to become like coaches, is to find something that fits. I don't think certifications have to take, forever. I really don't think that. I don't think they have to be, thousands and thousands of dollars, but I think when you're looking for a coach, I do think having a certification means that they got some kind of training about it, which is important, and any good coach that you see is going to have continued training. So I would say it's a lot around like training, what other approaches they use. I think it's also a really great question to ask about, ask kind of not what strategies, but what tools maybe they use as part of therapy or part of coaching, because those tools are going to look different as well. So it's like you as the client really want to look at like, what am I getting into, right? Is this something I need to take a different look at? Maybe I thought I needed a coach and I actually need a therapist because these other tools that you're describing are actually what I'm looking for. So I think asking about the tools that are used as well.
Okay. And that is so important because I think it's easy to get caught up on like, okay, I know the Enneagram, but it's like, well, the Enneagram is like information and it is a framework, but then like that delivery of the framework and how
Delivery, yes.
yes is also really important. So those are great things to think about. Okay, is there any advice that you would give listeners who are maybe they're dabbling with the Enneagram either in therapy or in their work? What advice would you have for them to incorporate the Enneagram into their professional development? Like, is there like a specific piece of the Enneagram? Is there general advice? Is there words of caution? Anything that would help a professional's growth journey, specifically in the workplace?
Yeah, so I think that as a professional using the Enneagram for like your own growth, I do
Yes.
think it's so important to just kind of go into it eyes wide open, have a lot of curiosity around it, and honestly be prepared to face things that make you want to throw up because you're like, is that really like how I function, or is that
Yeah.
really how other people experience me? I just think as a professional and want, especially like working with people, I think yeah, it's just really important to be really curious about it, have a lot of grace for yourself during that process, because I think that without, somebody coaching you or guiding you, it can be this process where you're like, you might get stuck. Or you might, depending on, kind of depending on, what part of you is dominant, you might get, real critical of yourself, or you might get real stuck on something, or you might overlook something because it's uncomfortable.
Yeah.
So I think just being ready to be eyes wide open with it and really just, it's a really great growth tool. And I do think it's not going to, I think it's so important for like professionals using the Enneagram just to know like, it's not like you want to build your team off of like, I need this type and I need this type and I need this. Like that is so not okay to do.
Mm-hmm.
It's like I tell clients, like, people are putting their Enneagram types on their dating profiles. It's like, no, don't just look at that and be like, thinking that this is going to be like a match for you. Like, no, don't do
Oh, they
that.
must be great. Yeah.
Right. They must be great or they're going to be a lot of fun. Like, no, don't
Yeah.
do that. So yeah, I just think staying curious, a lot of grace, a lot of self-compassion. And I would say, like, I think managers and leaders, I think it can get kind of, I don't know, it can get kind of lonely. Like there is a stop point. Like I live working with my team and I live my team and but there's boundaries in place, right? As a
Sure.
leader, as a manager. So it's like maybe don't just pick up the Enneagram by yourself. Like maybe with
Mhm.
somebody else who's on your level, else who you feel like, would be open with it. You guys can keep it fun initially, someone you can just be yourself with.
Oh, I love that. That's great advice. That is great advice.
Yeah.
Okay, so on that,
Mhm.
I want to give Dina a shout out because she also specifically works with parents. So, anybody who is like any professional listening to this that's like, I think I would really love to use this at home,
Mhm.
consider reaching out to Dina and we'll link your website, the way to learn more about that. Would you share where that is, though, just for anybody who is listening and wants to look it up real quick? How can they get in touch with you or an email address on that type of?
Yeah. No, for sure. I would say I have a Psychology Today page, so we can link to that.
Okay.
My email, they can reach me on my email is desmith11721@gmail.com.
Okay.
And then if you just put in like you want an Enneagram coach, I have a My Enneagram Coach profile, and so I'm on there as well.
Okay. And because, like we said, so many people leave our workshops thinking like, oh, I got to bring this home
Oh
somehow with
yeah.
my kids, with
Hmm.
my spouse, just to be a better parent, to be a better partner. And so
Hmm.
I know that you have taken some additional
Yes.
classes to be able, again, using it responsibly. That would not be an area
Yes.
that I would talk about, but Dina has that credibility. So you can do that. And then I do want to say, too, Dina is one of our facilitators, and we do have therapist groups that will reach out that Dina would be a great fit for. But also, I think just having the fact that I love having Dina on our team because she not only has that therapy background, the credentials, the experience that go along with that, but as a manager, she is using it in her day to day work life. So I think that is really important and impactful for a facilitator to be able to pull from, your bag of real life examples. And then one thing that I think is going to be more of a focus for us here at Enneagram MBA moving forward is sometimes people just want to do a workshop for entertainment. And
Hmm.
that is perfectly fine. 2 hours, we can give you a good time. We'll give you some laughs that you can chuckle about, for the rest of your life if you want. But then there's other groups that are like, we are going through a merger, we are growing a team, and or we are bringing in a new manager. And so it makes sense to do something more long term. And in those experiences, typing becomes really important. And Dina is really good at typing, individual coaching. So if you have a specific manager issue, professional issue, you're not sure about your type, I'm going to link how to get a one-on-one session with Dina going in that area as well. So, any last words, anything that you want to say, share that I didn't ask you about that would make this episode feel complete?
No, I mean, I think I'm just like so glad to get some of this information out there. I think it's important and I don't, I think it's when I added coaching as a part of being a therapist, I was so worried honestly about like oh my goodness, like, some therapists have a view of people who do coaching, like it's something watered down or it's not, it's not helpful, it's not useful. And I think that there is such a place for coaches and for facilitators with the Enneagram. And I felt that though, as a therapist, it was like, okay, I'm going to add this other thing. And it's kind of like, did I have to? You have to go and get a master's degree to be a coach. No, you don't. But guess what? Like coaches are helping a lot of people get through little emotions and get through those things. And that I think is okay. So I just, if there are clinical people listening to this, I think it's okay and we all have to play in the sandbox together.
Yes, I think that's a great take on that. And you also just made me think like people who might be going through career transitions, just how important a conversation about understanding yourself and where you want to go
Yes.
and understanding even where you want to go and using the Enneagram to help you clarify some of that could be really helpful. And I know many of us are also going through something like that. So all kinds of ways to use it, and Dina is
Yeah.
somebody who can help you do that. So I appreciate you, Dina, so much. Definitely, she's also on LinkedIn. I don't know if we said that, so connect with her. I know that our guests always love to hear directly from you listeners on what you're taking away, anything that you thought was funny, anything that you felt like was relatable. So definitely reach
Yes.
out. Dina, thank you for being here, and listeners, thank you for being here, and we'll see you in the next one.